Hello all, I hope you're well in these extraordinary times, and welcome to the Fintech Finance Virtual Arena, where I am hosting you here today. In this special arena, we're going to be discussing the exciting developments in payments and innovation within Central and Eastern Europe. So joining me today is none other than Christian Wolff, Head of Strategic Partnerships and Ecosystems. Christian and I have met before when I travelled to Vienna to ask all about innovation for the FinTech show, but obviously because of lockdown, we're hosting us here in the virtual arena. So for our viewers who may not have seen the original episode, Christian, can you give us a bit of background to yourself and your role at Raiffeisen Bank International?
Thank you for hosting me, and yes, I'm glad to do so. Actually, even my role evolved quite quickly over the last few months and years, and so also my role has considerably changed since the last time we've met. For the moment, I am responsible for strategic partnerships and ecosystems. And what does this actually mean? Is we found that there is quite a potential in cross-industry co-innovation approaches, and with FinTech being one special part of that. But we want to extend the offer of cooperation and collaboration to other parties as well. We have several approaches, for instance, in the area of purely digital cooperation concepts, very much based on the foundation of open banking. But we're also looking into emerging technologies that leverage the power of ecosystems. And of course, last but not least, as I just mentioned, we are working still very closely with fintechs within our, I'm lucky and happy to say, our just recently award-winning Elevator Lab, our FinTech Partnerships program.
Oh, congratulations. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
We were quite happy to receive a national award last year, but only recently Global Finance magazine has awarded us as one of the best innovation labs, and I'm quite happy and proud of what the team achieved there.
Absolutely brilliant, and getting an award generally is amazing. Getting an award like that in a pandemic is even better. So how do you think the pandemic is going to change the nature of being able to innovate and collaborating? Because when everyone's trying to stay away from each other, how do you then have that collaborative approach to work with outside partners to improve Raiffeisen's offering?
That's an interesting question, but on the one hand, the pandemic, of course, was a huge drive to innovate internally and also externally. When it comes on how do we co-innovate and work together with our business and partners, actually, I believe there isn't so much that changed, because even before, for instance, the just before mentioned Elevator Lab has always been a program that has been happening remotely anyhow. So we are currently, for instance, in an application for 2 new tracks of the program. And both of these tracks are completely remotely organized. And so even though, of course, we sometimes miss the personal interaction that is very important, especially in creative processes, I'm quite astonished on how well it is working by leveraging all the new technologies, as for instance here, these virtual setups. They are really working quite nicely for us.
Definitely. It's been interesting to see how different organizations have managed to handle it. And speaking from an industry-wide perspective, one of the main reasons we brought you in here today is to talk about payments. So could you give me a bit of background to the payments ecosystem in Central and Eastern Europe, or CEE, and how do you think that's going to change because of the pandemic?
Well, CE in general, not just for payments, is very fragmented, but this even more holds true for payments in particular. We have some markets that are super advanced, also compared to Western European markets. I just take as an example Czech Republic, Russia, and Croatia, for instance. But on the other side, we still have a lot of markets that are quite, I wouldn't call them underdeveloped, but when it comes to using cash, they're quite cash heavy. So they are not using digital solutions to the very same extent as others already do. And the other thing is that, of course, in recent years, we have had quite some progress when it comes to real-time payment systems. And you need to keep in mind that most of our countries in CE are not within the SEPA system. We are dealing with local currencies that are not dealt within the SEPA regulation. And so SEPA Instant cannot be used. And this is the reason why we saw the emergence of a lot of national initiatives that came up, for instance, in Hungary, in Serbia, in Poland. And actually there is a lot, or in Russia, for instance, there's a lot of experimentation on these markets when it comes with QR codes and with merchant to consumer payments. The other thing that I noticed and I observed is that contactless payments in general are more or less standard in CE for years already. In markets like Czechia, Slovakia, Romania, there was already a heavy push by card schemes and banks several years ago towards such contactless payments. And in comparison to, for instance, our home region, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, so-called DACH, in pre-corona times, they already had more or less a 100% share of cashless payments, of contactless payments. Whereas in the DACH region, this is something below 50%. And I think also on a pure bank level, the banks are quite innovative in these markets compared to Western Europe. I again mentioned the same countries as I just did. They introduced very early wallets, but from my personal point of view, even there it seems that Apple Pay and Google seem to make a race. I'm not yet sure how it ends up, but in general, the progress is quite astonishing and advancing quite nicely.
Excellent. I mean, that must be an absolutely exciting, time and part to be to really be working in. And so I've got to ask you, do you think that artificial intelligence is going to play an increased role in payments and financial services now that we are seeing more remote working and digital technologies being ultimately more adopted?
Yes, I certainly believe so. Artificial intelligence, I think, has various impact points to the bank. I think when it already comes to the very first interaction or first contact point with the customers, artificial intelligence in the nature of, for instance, chatbots can be used to better shape and to make it more a real-time interaction with the customer, to make it also on the bank side more efficient and cost-effective. On the other side, artificial intelligence can be used to improve when it comes for credit scoring, so meaning the assessment of creditworthiness, because to my personal feeling, it allows us to more precisely assess this creditworthiness than it ever was possible before, because finally this technology allows us not to assess consumers based on traditional regression-based methods that might be not fitting actually the real-world case and produce a lot of false declines. Here, I believe we have much more accuracy and better understanding on actually what the customer is really doing and helping us there. The other point I would like to mention is in automation. For instance, also automation of alternative payments. So we can use artificial intelligence to analyze the habits in the payments area of our customers, but then based on the information we gather there, propose them better offerings. For instance, if we find out that they're using their cards when traveling abroad and they pay a lot of fees, we can offer cheaper cards. when we see they incur a lot of costs when it comes to recurring payments, we could change that. We can, in general, this would help us to better fit into the customer journey and also provide some value added that is based on insights that we didn't have before. And last but not least, I just mentioned needless integration into customer journeys, especially now reflecting to the pandemic when it comes to e-commerce. There is quite some potential in there. So meaning whatever kind of means you can use to really make this a needless and a frictionless experience in the whole buying process. And the ultimate one I want to mention is, of course, also partly a big topic now because of the pandemic is as a security layer to prevent fraud.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that's absolutely huge for, especially for larger transactions, maybe business banking. And where would you say within CE has the chance to effectively, you said that some are more cash dominated, for instance, but are there parts of CE which are perfectly placed, shall I say, to leapfrog more developed markets because of the fact that they are starting out on this digital journey from this current point?
I wouldn't name a single one, but certainly there is. We have already seen this in other parts of the economy. And for instance, if you want to stick to the payments markets and you look into what's happening in Africa, there was basically nothing available before, and now they are using peer-to-peer payment systems as they were not dependent on any legacy systems that they needed to include in their thinking and execution. As I said, the heterogeneity of our CE markets certainly leads to situations where you can say that if I want to transfer technology and applications and user journeys from more mature markets into these, of course, they leapfrog certain development steps. And this is also something that we actively promote and push from an internal perspective into the group.
Oh, tremendous. And going back to your original point where you're talking about fragmentation, a lot of people have been very excited about the decentralization of financial ecosystems. I mean, what's that looking like in CE, and especially as your role in innovation, what are you excited about when it comes to decentralizing payments and financial technology?
I wouldn't limit this to payments, but I think when talking about decentralized finance, the first thing that comes into mind is blockchain. Quite hyped, but I believe, especially in that field, quite rightfully hyped. We as RBI group, we are very actively looking into the opportunities that this technology might bring up. I do not say that decentralized finance must exclusively be built on blockchain solutions. It can be, of course, other solutions, but for the moment it looks very promising. I believe it looks very promising, for instance, when we look what's happening in the area of crypto assets. I deliberately do not just mention cryptocurrencies. I'm talking here, for instance, also including tokenized equity or tokenized debt, etc., and to make this actually tradable. This provides a completely new, unforeseen potential setup that allows for peer-to-peer transfer of assets, that allows for immediate and near or even real-time settlement of these assets. And also looking at the concept of tokenization, I firmly believe this also leads to a kind of a democratization of investment. Because ultimately you can buy fractions of shares, fractions of whatever asset, it can even be a piece of art, and that wouldn't have been accessible to you before.
Yeah, that to me is really what... that to me is the definition of fintech, really. It's the empowering and the democratization, as you said, of these financial services that might have only been available to a very small minority, and opening them up to everyone. And do you think that's something that RBI Group might be looking into? Because I know there are some some fintech players that are already looking at tokenizing these assets. Do you think that's something that a large organization like yourself will start looking into in the future?
Actually, we already do.
Oh, brilliant.
We have set up, even a few years ago already, what we internally call our blockchain hub. The blockchain hub, its purpose is, of course, looking at the technology, but even more so focusing on the business potential that the technology brings to us. And we found very quickly, when it comes to the concept of tokenization, this bears enormous potential for us. We have just recently put the word out on the market that we teamed up with a British-Polish fintech called Bilon, with which we built what we call the RBI coin, which is more or less a euro-backed stable coin that we want to use for inter-corporate or inter-institutional settlement for the moment. And this actually quite nicely relates what we just discussed earlier here, is as most of our markets are not within SEPA, this certainly has some value for us and our clients, because all of a sudden we can also, outside of the euro area, we can offer instant settlement for whatever local currency you name.
Can you tell me a bit more about how using these blockchain technologies are not only going to speed up the payments throughout CE, but also make them more secure?
The thing is that, of course, you always had in the let's say traditional payment, you had the settlement times. So you sent money or cash being an asset for us, of course, as a bank, the most important one. You sent from A to B, and it took, let's say, 2 days, T+2, in order to be settled and booked onto the receiver's account. And this settlement risk is more or less completely removed with this instant transfer of tokens. In addition, when we just look at the RBI token and the ecosystem that we conceived here is all of the participating parties within the systems are known and fully KYC'd. And so you also take out the counterparty risk to some extent. And in addition, of course, in the very nature of the technology itself, being transparent, being immutable, etc. So you also tackle the one or other question when it comes to security, when it comes to transparency, when it comes to each and every party knowing exactly what is the current state of the transfer.
That must do so much for the customer experience for a lot of your business clients. And so, speaking of utilizing these new technologies, what are you doing to ultimately improve the customer experience in other ways for your retail and business clients?
I believe there is a good example that also relates to the pandemic, and I deliberately want to go out now from blockchain and move back to our fintech corporation. We out of our last batches from the Elevator Lab, we built up a cooperation with one specific fintech called Moxtra that we now. That helps us in a better digital interaction between the branches and our end customers. So we decided to implement this solution as a group solution and to offer it for remote sales and services for premium and private banking clients. And this solution offers web chat, it offers calls, videos, and document sharing. It helps you in screen sharing, recording of all the interaction between the bank and the customer, and this all being completely MiFID compliant. And I believe that customers very much benefit here from a simplification of the communication and the general interaction and exchange. And the platform also helps us to replace all this numerous and this host of emails going back and forth, telephone calls, mails, personal transmissions, and whatever. So this is all more or less combined into one application that we offer in communicating and interacting with our customers. And I believe this nicely fits into on how do we see the further development into a more digital bank. On the other hand, it helps us also explain on how new technologies can help us to tackle situations that we have now seen in the pandemic.
Definitely. And do you think that we're actually going to see this digital adoption maintain this pace now that people can't really access branches? We saw, especially in the UK, I believe there was a 60% decrease in the use of ATMs. Do you think in Central and Eastern Europe we are going to see similar numbers? Because, for instance, as you said, in the DACH region, there's still a large amount of cash prevalence. Do you think we're going to see, just in the same way in the UK, a significant decrease in cash and increase in card and digital payments?
I can tell, but I would believe so. I just give you one example of my personal environment, and I'm just looking at my own parents. They've always been reluctant in going to the supermarket or the local grocery store, and they were used to paying cash, and it was fine for them. But now, as in the pandemic, everybody, or the message was out, rather avoid contact, so also use contactless payments, and they more or less were, by the situation, forced into using that. And I found it quite interesting when I got the feedback that actually this is not too complicated as we thought, And also when sitting at home, that all of a sudden those who would never have thought of going shopping into an online channel, into an e-commerce website, they now needed to do it, and they found out this is actually not some devil's work,
No, I can completely imagine.
I believe that was also a huge push for those parts of the population that were rather reluctant in using these digital channels for various reasons. They might have had quite good ones. And I think this will very much drive digitalization, because on the other hand, these smaller grocery stores that I just mentioned, offering their produce and product locally here, in order to survive, they needed to go digital, because otherwise within the pandemic there wouldn't be anybody shopping with them. And if you combine these two things, customer behavior changing, but also the options and the potential possibilities that the merchants offer changing, I believe we see a tremendous push towards much more digitalization too. I believe, of course, there will be also a pushback that, of course, people are looking for that personal and physical interaction, but still these barriers, perceived barriers, they have been brought down to another lower level.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear about the businesses also having to move into the digital space, not just the individuals, and I completely agree. That's got to be one of the biggest reasons behind this sustaining this digital innovation pace. Talking about this changing role to becoming more digital, banks are obviously having less of a footprint in the physical. In a physical way. People are interacting with their branches less. They're interacting with you over mobile more. How is this changing role of a bank going to play, and how can you maintain that brand presence while still mainly just being digital?
I believe we discussed artificial intelligence and the technology that earlier. I believe using these technologies can help us a lot, firsthand in better understanding the client, and secondly, then better shaping our own offer to those clients. And I personally believe that these offers can and will be also beyond what we currently consider our core business. there is a lot of ideas out there that did not come up just from us, but you as a bank, in general, you have a lot of customer touch points, but you just need to use and leverage them and provide value. So not only deliver, let's say, the payment as a stable product, but also deliver something around the payment. And that is, of course, utmost, but is ease of use and needless integration. But then, as I just mentioned with the artificial intelligence before, and the surrounding and additional value-added services. And this could be that with a bank, we screen your subscriptions, we screen your energy bills, and we give you recommendations if you want to change your provider. We help you better understand your mobility needs, and we propose you something that might be a better setup for you. We help you not just in a very specific point, but for instance in the whole journey of housing. This is not just financing your home. This is covering the whole journey from actually identifying that there is a need, then identifying and helping you select the best option for you, be it an apartment and house at whatever location, then of course financing it, but then also maybe helping you find the right contractor, the right painter, the right people who help you remodel it.
Yeah.
And this, the last example I really like, because actually it puts two different kinds of customer of the bank into connection. It links them. On the one hand, we have our corporate customers, and do not always think about corporate customers as the big corporations, the global ones, but this is also including small SMEs here locally, and they make a living out of these connections. And I think this can be beneficial for everybody. And this is what I call a platform. You bring together the consumer and the producer, and you as an intermediary kind of in between, you help them on both sides.
That's got to be, well, I can't wait for that to happen. I mean, what are we looking at? Are we looking at a decade maybe? Do you think is the technology there, or is the technology there, or is it just a cultural thing holding us back?
Hard to say. I tend to believe it's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
We have within my team, we have the open banking team in there as well. Open banking, I know in the UK is rather considered as compliance to the PSD2 regulation, but we phrased it, our term is meant in such a way, this is everything based on APIs that allows us for new corporations and collaboration. So it's more or less, it's about interconnectivity. And interconnectivity also means openness. So you are not in the position anymore that you only consume data or services from the outside world to your liking, but you also need to offer data and services to the outside world. And I think this makes the value of the ecosystem. And once you overcome your maybe internal mental barrier that it's not good to share what you're actually doing, then this can really offer a lot of opportunities based on the network effect, actually.
Well, I'm 100% in. That sounds very exciting to me. And kind of, this is a question really I want to phrase to you because, for people, readers who might be based in the States, or in the UK and might not be so familiar with the ecosystem in Central and Eastern Europe. What fintech innovations do you think we'll see that will be stronger than anywhere else in the world? What does Central and Eastern Europe have to offer the fintech ecosystem around the world?
It's a good question. We, as I just said, we are now running our fourth batch of the Elevator Lab, and so we found here a new setup where we teamed up with our local banks and have had them define our focus and search areas. And these were very much based also on what's happening locally and what's driving the local economies, but also what do we see as an offer in the fintech area. And now coming back to your question, we just talked about open banking, and this is one of the things that the applications within the Elevator Lab in the past years were mostly around open banking and analytics. Perfectly now matching to our talk now. So analytics being part of or integrated with artificial intelligence. I believe that this high number of fintechs in open banking may relate to the fact that the CEE countries are known for a very young but also technophile population, which traditionally has a very strong educational background as well. Usually a strong educational background in sciences. And I believe it's very likely that the consumers in the CE markets will be very eager to use new technologies that are based on open banking platforms. And the other surprising fact that I saw just by browsing through our list is that a lot of those fintechs in open banking and analytics are actually coming from the Russian Federation.
Yeah. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, it sounds like a very exciting time to be part of that ecosystem. And I think it's so important to have demand for these new financial services because it is quite as we said, it comes down to education because people aren't typically talking about money. So to have that demand is so important for open banking. But Christian, that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for your insight into the area, the region, and innovation. And to all our viewers, thank you for watching. You can catch this and the rest of the series at www.fintechf.com and, of course, YouTube. Look forward to seeing you at the next one. See you then. Bye.